are there any antidotes to meaninglessness? And rational antidotes are hard to come by, because you can just say, well, who cares if in 1,000 years we're all going to be dead? Why get out of bed in the morning? You can't really mount a rational case why that's not reasonable.
Can you argue through nihilism from a purely rationalistic standpoint? I wonder about that. I think the nihilism that we're experiencing in society today is a direct result to Nietzsche's work and others who basically say, God is dead. And if God is dead, then yeah, there is no purpose to life. Like, that is a logical conclusion. You go from theism to deism to naturalism to nihilism. Yeah, after naturalism comes nihilism. That's kind of a logical conclusion. And then once you arrive at nihilism, you have to make a choice. Are you going to try to live consistently with that nihilism? Or are you going to push through that and realize the reason that we've arrived at nihilism is not because the world is meaningless, but it's because the world is actually meaningful and we're missing it?
Now, I'm not saying it is reasonable, but I thought about music. Music is a very strange art form. I had a great journalist friend of mine. He said to me the other day, he said, all art aspires to the condition of music, which I thought was great. But music, you think about the revitalizing effect music continues to have in our culture, especially among young people, and that's really, really been the case since the beginning of the 60s. It's like we got more nihilistic and less religious and all of that as our culture became more secular and more rational, more materialistic. And at the same time, the power of music as a cultural phenomenon just grew and grew and grew and grew.
It has a revitalizing effect. So in the midst of as nihilism and meaninglessness grows, so does music that has this revitalizing effect. I think that's a really good observation. This is where I want to bring in Schaeffer, because he's going to do a great job of unpacking the secular worldview and the biblical Christian worldview and the very different conclusions that we draw from each of those. The secular worldview, we've already said, is ending us in nihilism. The biblical Christian worldview is going to point us onward to worship, which is a harmony that we've been talking about, as a kind of unity and diversity brought together in a harmony, which I find beautiful. Of course, again, I'm coming at this from a biblical Christian worldview. Schaeffer is a Christian theologian, philosopher, and he is going to compare for us the sort of rationalistic person to the person who has discovered divine revelation. And so my question is, well, not my question, my assumption is, what I believe is that the structure that we're looking for is divine revelation. Now, it's not laws and things like that, but it's more like music, like we're talking about with Jordan Peterson, or the poetry that we find in Scripture.
Up to a certain point in the development of the Renaissance, it could have gone in a good direction or a poor one. Freedom was introduced, both in the North by the Reformation and in the South by the Renaissance. But in the South, it brought forth license. The reason was that the humanism of the Renaissance had no way to bring forth meaning for the individual things, for the particulars, nor absolutes in the area of morals. Humanism, which began with man being central, eventually has no meaning for man. But in the North...
And that's the nihilism that we're talking about. The humanism leads to a lack of meaning for man. So in the North, he's talking about the Reformation.
The men of the Reformation, standing under the Scripture, regained direction. And the totality of life, as well as nature, became a thing of beauty and dignity.
Beauty and dignity.
Man was given a reason for being great. And he was given a reason for freedom. And yet, compelling absolute values.
Yeah. So again, we're talking about freedom, form, structure, and what kind of structure is it? And again, I resist even the word structure. Form maybe is a better word, because that can indicate some kind of art. And that's why I think Schaeffer points to beauty. So I wonder if now we get to talk about mosh pits and punk rock music.
Music gives you the intimation of meaning, right, directly. So I used to watch punk rockers. I went to a Ramones concert once, which was really fun. We were up in the second floor of this theater in Montreal, and the Ramones were playing on stage like 100 feet away with their huge stadium equipment. It was so loud in there. Like I had to listen to the whole concert with my ears plugged, and I was still like 3/4 deaf for 3 days. And beneath us on the stage, sort of in front of the stage, there was a flat place, and all these punks were down there smashing into each other and doing this really rough dance. And I thought, this is so cool. We got all these nihilistic punks in here, like half beating themselves up, dancing.
So he's describing a mosh pit, which is actually something I have a little bit of experience with, a little bit of expertise in that. I love that Jordan Peterson is telling a story about him being at a Ramones concert. But you know that if you grew up in a punk rock scene like I did, if you've experienced punk rock music, if you've experienced that culture, you know that the best kind of mosh pit is the one that goes in a circle. The circle pit is where that passion, that anger, all the stuff that you're working out through that mosh pit meets a type of structure and a type of form where you're all moving in a circle, this mass of people, and it's chaotic and it's painful, and you might fall over, and there's so many people that as you fall into the person that's in front of you, and that person probably doesn't know it, but they're supporting you and keeping you from falling. And then if you do happen to fall, if you're in a good mosh pit, the person behind you doesn't want to trip over you and fall themselves, so they try to pick you up and put you back into the mosh pit, and then you just keep this circle pit going. And it is an amazing actual example of freedom within form that we're talking about. The chaos, the dance of chaos and human freedom and tyranny.
And being taken in by this rough music that gave them, even in their aggressive nihilism, a sense of meaning. I thought that was so cool. So why does music do that? That's a good question, because people think of music as a non-representational art. It doesn't represent anything. It's not like a drawing or a picture, or even dance where you can act something out. Not that I didn't say it was without content.
I see what you're saying. But you said
Right.
representation.
Yeah,
But
well, you could say it represents emotions, and fair
Yeah.
enough.
Yeah.
But I was thinking more like a picture of
I
an
see what
actual
you're
thing.
saying.
Okay, so
Okay.
so let's think about what music is. First of all, it's a pattern. So non-pattern music is noise. It's a pattern. But then it isn't one pattern. It's multiple patterns layered on top of one another.
Okay, so he's talking about structure. Remember, we started this conversation with the political question of like what structures can be in place to allow for human freedom to thrive in a community of people, which is political. And he's describing the structure of music, and he said non-pattern music is noise. We're going to talk about John Cage and Francis Schaeffer here in a little bit, which is a great example of someone trying to almost live out those nihilistic, sort of postmodern, irrational worldview in music, and where it ends up is clever. And Schaeffer does a great job of using that as an example.
Cage believed the universe is a universe of chance. To express this, he produced music by chance. Cage's music turned out to be sheer noise.
You gotta love Schaeffer's take here. We see as someone tries to live out a secular worldview, or like John Cage, a worldview that believes that everything has come by chance, that we're going to live according to that. And so we can see in music what we would potentially see politically if we cannot respond to the world the way we're supposed to. And I believe we live in God's world, and we should respond to God in worship, not just singing songs or going to worship services, which is part of that, but a life of worship. And if I, as an individual, and as we corporately live our lives in a way that is honoring to God, then there will be a unity and a harmony in the midst of diversity and freedom. That's the hope. Not even the hope. I mean, if you read the Bible, that's the way it's going to be. That's the beatific vision. That's the heavenly kingdom. It's a kingdom where all of this is sorted out, and there is harmony, and there is freedom. And yet there's a diversity of people and different languages and different ethnicities and all of that coming together, all in one big banquet feast, which is kind of cool.